The red emergency lights painted everything in shades of blood and shadow across Harmony 7's main diplomatic hall. David Reed pressed himself against the service corridor wall, watching through the maintenance window as chaos unfolded below. His tool belt jingled softly as another crash echoed through the enormous chamber. Ambassador Wren stood frozen near the ceremonial platform, his forearms spread wide in a gesture of helplessness. The Valorian diplomat's green scales had gone pale with fear. Around him, delegates from a dozen worlds scrambled for cover behind pillars and furniture. Security drones hovered at a safe distance, their weapons powered down because shooting was not an option. The problem moved like lightning through the scattered crowd. Stryker was only 3 feet tall, but his species had evolved from apex predators. Even as a juvenile, his claws could shred steel. His pointed teeth gleamed as he roared, a sound that made David's bones vibrate. The young Valorian's tail whipped back and forth, knocking over a priceless statue from the crystalline communion. "Maintain distance," the security chief barked into her communicator. "Do not approach the hostile." "He's not hostile," David muttered to himself. "He's terrified." He had been replacing air filters in the upper levels when the alarm started. The initial report said a dangerous predator was loose. David expected something much worse. What he saw instead was a scared child, throwing a tantrum in the worst possible place. Down below, a Melodian diplomat tried approaching with a sonic harmonizer. Their species used specific frequencies to calm agitated beings. The device hummed, filling the air with tones that supposedly soothed any nervous system. Stryker responded by lunging at the diplomat, missing by inches. The Melodian dropped the harmonizer and fled. "Chemical approach authorized," someone said over the station's communication system. A trio of gossamer scientists floated forward, their translucent bodies glowing with bioluminescent patterns. They released clouds of calming pheromones into the air. Most species found these chemicals irresistible, sinking into peaceful states within seconds. Stryker sneezed violently and became more agitated. He grabbed a chair and threw it. The furniture sailed through a gossamer scientist, disrupting their form. Ambassador Wren made a strangled sound. His translator rendered it as despair. "Please, someone help my son." David had worked on Harmony 7 for 2 years. He fixed broken things. Pipes, wiring, air systems, gravity generators. He kept the station running while diplomats argued about trade routes and border disputes. Nobody ever asked the maintenance crew for advice on important matters. He watched Stryker huddle against a wall, small body heaving with each breath. The cub's eyes were too wide. His claws scraped against the floor in repetitive patterns. David recognized those signs. His sister's kids did the same thing during meltdowns. Different species, same fear response. "This is stupid," David said, making a decision. He walked away from the window and headed for the recycling bay. His supervisor's voice crackled over his personal communicator. "Reed, where are you going?" "All non-essential personnel need to shelter in place. I need something from storage." "Are you insane? There's a code red situation." "I know. That's why I need it." The recycling bay smelled like plastic and metal. David found what he wanted in the corner. A shipping container had arrived that morning with replacement parts for the water purification system. The parts were already installed. The box sat empty, waiting to be compressed and recycled. It was brown cardboard, about 3 feet on each side, with ventilation holes punched in the corners. David grabbed the box and headed back toward the diplomatic hall. His communicator exploded with voices. His supervisor, the security chief, someone from station command. He ignored them all. The main doors to the hall were locked down. David used his maintenance override code to open a side entrance. The panel beeped green and the door slid open. He stepped through, every eye in the room turned toward him. Ambassador Wren's translator broke the shocked silence. "Human, you must evacuate immediately." "In a minute," David said. Stryker spotted the new arrival and hissed. The sound would have been terrifying from an adult Valorian. From a child, it just sounded sad. David kept his movements slow and deliberate. He walked to a spot about 15 feet from the young predator and set the cardboard box down on the floor. "What is he doing?" Someone whispered. "Is that a container?" "The human has lost his mind." David sat down cross-legged next to the box. He made a show of examining his fingernails, looking everywhere except directly at Stryker. This was important. His niece hated being stared at during her episodes. Made her feel cornered. Probably the same for scared predators. Stryker's hissing quieted. His tail stopped thrashing quite so violently. David could feel the cub watching him, but he kept his own gaze averted. He hummed softly, an old tune his mother used to sing. Nothing special, just comfortable sound to fill the silence. Minutes passed. The diplomats barely breathed. Security drones hovered in place, recording everything. Stryker took a step toward the box, then another. His nostrils flared, taking in the scent of cardboard and old packaging tape. David continued humming, still not looking directly at the young Valorian. The predator cub circled the box once, twice. His claws tapped against the floor. On the third circle, he paused at the opening David had left facing away from the crowd. Stryker sniffed the interior. Then, moving faster than David expected, Stryker climbed inside the box. The transformation was immediate. The aggressive posture melted away. Stryker's breathing slowed. He curled up in the enclosed space, his tail wrapping around his body. Through the ventilation holes, David could see the cub's eyes already starting to close. Ambassador Wren made a sound like a sob. "How did you—" David finally looked up at the gathered diplomats. He just needed somewhere safe and small, somewhere he could hide. "My sister has cats back on Earth. They do the same thing when they're scared. Find a box, climb inside, feel better. Your solution was a container." The security chief sounded offended. "Sometimes the simple thing works best," David said. He stood up slowly, careful not to disturb Stryker. "He's just a scared kid. Being in a huge open space with strangers probably felt awful. The box gives him walls. Makes the world smaller. Less overwhelming." Ambassador Wren approached carefully, looking down at his sleeping son. "We tried everything. Our best specialists, technology, chemical solutions. Yeah, but did you try cardboard?" The ambassador's translator couldn't quite capture his laugh, but the emotion was clear enough. Relief flooded through the diplomatic hall. The emergency lights switched off. Normal illumination returned. David picked up his tool belt. "I should get back to work. Those air filters won't replace themselves." "Wait," Ambassador Wren said. "I must know your name." "David Reed. Maintenance." "David Reed of Maintenance, you have done what the greatest minds of the galaxy could not." David shrugged. "I just remembered that kids are kids no matter where they're from. They need to feel safe. Everything else is details." He walked back toward the service corridor, leaving the diplomat staring at a sleeping predator cub curled up in a cardboard box. Behind him, he heard someone say, "Perhaps we should study these human techniques." David smiled. Wait until they learned about blanket forts. 3 days had passed since the incident with the cardboard box, and David's life had become significantly more complicated. He stood in front of Ambassador Wren's temporary quarters, holding a container of spare parts and wondering how his simple job had turned into whatever this was. The door opened before he could knock. A smaller Valorian greeted him, scales bright green and healthy now. Stryker chirped happily and grabbed David's free hand with surprising gentleness. "Hello to you too," David said. Ambassador Wren appeared behind his son, looking far more composed than their first meeting. "David Reed of Maintenance. Thank you for coming. Your message said it was urgent. It is. Please come inside." The quarters were larger than David's entire apartment. Furniture adapted for Valorian physiology filled the space, but what caught his attention was the collection of cardboard boxes scattered throughout the room, at least a dozen of them. Different sizes, different origins, all clearly gathered with care. "I may have become overly enthusiastic," Ambassador Wren admitted, "but Stryker refuses to sleep anywhere else now." The young Valorian pulled David toward the largest box, chirping excitedly. Inside, David saw blankets arranged into a nest. A few toys. A datapad showing what looked like Valorian cartoons. "He wants to show you his den," Wren explained. "You are the first person outside our family he has trusted since we lost his bonded caretaker 6 months ago." That explained a lot. David crouched down to Stryker's level. "This is very nice. You made it comfortable." Stryker beamed with pride that transcended species barriers. "The urgent matter," Wren continued, "relates to the trade negotiations. They resume tomorrow. Stryker has been calm here, but the moment I attempt to bring him to any public space, he becomes distressed. Our specialists believe he has developed separation anxiety." "From you?" David blinked. "From me? We've only met once. You saved him when he was terrified." Young Valorians imprint strongly on protectors. His previous caretaker died in an accident. The trauma made it impossible for him to bond with anyone new. "Until you..." You gave him safety without demanding trust, allowed him to come to you. In our culture, this is the highest form of respect. I just gave him a box. You gave him exactly what he needed when everyone else failed. Ren's forearms moved in a gesture David didn't recognize. I have a request that goes beyond normal diplomatic bounds. Would you attend the negotiations with us? Having you present may allow Stryker to remain calm. David almost laughed. I'm a maintenance worker. I can't go to diplomatic negotiations. I have already cleared this with your supervisors and station command. They were surprisingly agreeable after I explained that the entire trade agreement between our worlds may collapse. If my son has another episode, you're serious. Completely. That was how David found himself, sitting in the corner of conference room 7 the next morning, wearing his cleanest jumpsuit and feeling completely out of place. Diplomats from 5 different species filled the room. All of them kept glancing at him with expressions ranging from curiosity to confusion. Stryker sat on a cushion next to David's chair, playing quietly with a puzzle cube. The young Valorian seemed perfectly content as long as David stayed within sight. The negotiations were incredibly boring. Trade percentages, shipping routes, tariff structures. David understood maybe 1 word in 10. He spent most of his time making sure Stryker stayed entertained. He had brought some spare wire from his toolkit and showed the cub how to bend it into different shapes. 2 hours in, a crystalline delegate's child began crying. The sound was like wind chimes being dropped downstairs. The delegate tried to comfort her offspring, but the young crystalline's vibrations grew stronger. The conference table started trembling. Perhaps a brief recess, the mediator suggested, voice strained. David watched the crystalline child. She was wrapped around her parent's central column, resonating with distress. The other delegates were backing away. Apparently, young crystallines could shatter things when they got too upset. May I try something? David asked. Every head in the room turned toward him. The crystalline delegate's translator rendered their response. You are the human who calmed Ambassador Ren's offspring. I just helped him feel safe. Maybe I could try with your daughter. You would risk this? Her frequencies can damage organic tissue. Let me get something first. David stepped out of the conference room and returned 2 minutes later with a thick thermal blanket from the emergency supplies. He approached the crystalline child slowly, keeping his movements gentle and predictable. Hey there, he said softly. I'm David. You seem pretty upset. The child's vibrations intensified. Her parent made a worried sound. I know meetings are boring, David continued. I'm bored too. Want to see something neat? He held up the thermal blanket, letting it unfold. The material was designed to block radiation and extreme temperatures. Thick, soft, and heavy. David draped it carefully over the young crystalline's upper structure. The vibrations dampened immediately. Not gone, but muffled by the blanket's density. The child seemed surprised, then interested. She pulled the blanket tighter around herself. It's like a hug, right? David said. Sometimes pressure feels good when everything is too much. The crystalline delegate stared at him. Our specialists use frequency dampeners. Expensive technology. You used a blanket. Weighted blankets help anxious kids on Earth. Figured it might work across species. The young crystalline had stopped crying. She hummed softly, a peaceful sound. Her parents' relief was obvious. What is your background? The delegate asked. Are you a specialist in child psychology? I fix air conditioning and replace light panels. Silence filled the conference room. Could you? Another delegate began hesitantly. Could you perhaps attend future negotiations? I have offspring who struggle in formal settings. By the end of the week, David had somehow become an unofficial childcare provider for the entire diplomatic contingent. His tool belt now shared space with toys, snacks suitable for various species, and an ever-growing collection of cardboard boxes. An aquatic delegate's tadpole wouldn't eat. David added colored lights to the water tank, making feeding time more interesting. The tadpole ate enthusiastically while watching the light show. A silicon-based seedling went dormant from stress. David played soft music near their container and maintained a consistent temperature. The seedling perked up within a day. Each problem seemed impossible to the specialists. Each solution was something David remembered from helping raise his nieces and nephews. Routine helped children feel secure. Comfort items reduced anxiety. Play made difficult situations more bearable. Simple stuff. Ambassador Wren found him in the makeshift play area David had set up in an unused storage room. Stryker was building a tower out of boxes while 3 other diplomats' children watched. "You have created something remarkable," Wren said. "It's just boxes and recycled junk." "No. You have created the first truly cross-species childcare facility this station has ever seen. Scientists are requesting permission to study your methods." David laughed. "My methods are just being nice and paying attention." "Perhaps that is exactly what the galaxy needs to learn." A Melodian child chimed happily as her box tower collapsed. She immediately started building again. Stryker helped, his earlier trauma seemingly forgotten in the simple joy of play. David watched them all, these children from different worlds finding common ground in cardboard and kindness. Maybe the galaxy's problem was overthinking everything. Maybe sometimes you just needed to remember that kids were kids no matter how many arms they had or what atmosphere they breathed. "I should probably write this down," David said, "in case other people want to try it." Ambassador Wren's translator couldn't quite capture his tone, but David suspected the Valorian was smiling. "I believe that would benefit many worlds." In the corner, Stryker chirped proudly as his tower reached a new height. David grinned. Yeah, he should definitely write this down. The research team arrived on Harmony 7 during the 3rd week of negotiations, and David knew his quiet life was officially over. He stood in the observation room watching scientists from 4 different species set up monitoring equipment around his improvised play area. They carried devices that hummed, beeped, and occasionally glowed in colors that hurt to look at. "This is ridiculous," David muttered. His supervisor, Patricia, stood next to him holding a datapad that displayed his new work schedule. Or rather, his complete lack of normal work schedule. "Station Command is taking this seriously. Your unofficial childcare program has prevented 3 diplomatic incidents in 2 weeks. They want it studied and formalized. I'm not running a program. I'm just watching some kids while their parents work. You've somehow managed to calm children from 17 different species using techniques that contradict everything in the Galactic Childcare database. The scientists are very interested in understanding how." Down below, a whispering willow's offspring was having trouble with emotional regulation. The small plant-based child kept shifting colors rapidly, cycling through their species' entire emotional spectrum in seconds. Their parents stood nearby looking exhausted. David excused himself and headed downstairs. The scientists tracked his movement with their instruments. He felt like a specimen under glass. "Hey, little one," David said quietly, kneeling next to the young willow. "Lots of feelings today, huh?" The child's leaves rustled with agitation. Colors flickered faster. Purple for confusion, red for anger, blue for sadness, all blending together. David pulled a soft cloth from his pocket and gently draped it over the child's central stem. Sometimes it helps to slow down. Focus on one thing. He began humming, the same simple tune he always used. Nothing fancy, just consistent sound. His hand rested lightly on the cloth, applying gentle pressure. The color shifting slowed. The young willow gradually settled into a soft green. Calm. Their parent made a sound like wind through branches, probably relief. "How did you know to do that?" One of the scientists approached, a floating species whose name David could never pronounce. Their translator rendered their question with academic precision. "My nephew gets overwhelmed sometimes. Too many feelings all at once. His therapist taught us grounding techniques. Help him focus on physical sensations instead of emotions. Seemed like it might work here. Your species has documented this approach?" "Yeah, it's pretty common knowledge on Earth. Kids need help learning to regulate their emotions. You don't just leave them to figure it out alone." The scientist made notes on a device. "Fascinating. The whispering willows use chemical treatments for emotional dysregulation. Your approach is entirely non-pharmacological. You drug kids for having feelings? It is standard medical practice." David bit back his initial response. Getting angry at alien doctors wouldn't help anyone. Instead, he asked, "Does it work?" "The treatments are effective in 60% of cases." "And the other 40%? The scientist hesitated. "They struggle. Maybe try the cloth thing first. Cheaper, and no side effects." Over the next few days, the research team followed David constantly. They recorded everything. His tone of voice when speaking to children, the way he arranged the play space, his choices in activities and comfort items. They measured, quantified, and analyzed every aspect of what David considered basic common sense. A breakthrough came during an incident with a magma dweller's child. The young creature's body temperature kept spiking dangerously high, a stress response that could damage the station's infrastructure. Specialists wanted to use thermal dampening fields, expensive technology that required careful calibration. David instead created a routine. Every hour, he helped the child practice breathing exercises. Deep inhales, slow exhales. Between sessions, he gave the young magma dweller tasks to focus on. Simple things like sorting blocks or drawing pictures. The child's temperature stabilized within a day. Routine, one scientist said, as if discovering fire. You are establishing predictable patterns. Kids feel safer when they know what's coming next, David explained. Reduces anxiety. Less anxiety means less stress responses. This is not in our databases. Maybe your databases are missing some things. The scientists conferred among themselves in frequencies David couldn't hear. When they finished, their spokesperson approached him. We would like to understand your training. What institution taught you these techniques? No institution. I just helped raise my sister's kids. Picked stuff up along the way. You have no formal education in childcare? Not unless you count babysitting for beer money in college. This seemed to disturb them more than comfort them. They retreated to their equipment, muttering about informal knowledge transfer and undocumented methodologies. Ambassador Wren found David during lunch break. Stryker followed his father, now comfortable enough to explore but always keeping David in sight. The scientists are writing papers about you, Wren said. Apparently you have revolutionized their understanding of cross-species child development. David picked at his food. I just do what feels right. Pay attention to what the kids need. Adjust based on their responses. It's not complicated. That is precisely why it is revolutionary. Galactic standard practice involves extensive testing, species-specific protocols, and technological solutions. You use observation and adaptation. Seems more efficient. It is, which is causing a crisis of confidence among childcare professionals across multiple worlds. Stryker chirped and showed David a drawing he had made. It was mostly scribbles, but David could make out two figures, one green and scaled, one pink and smooth. Valorian and human. This is great, Stryker. Is that us? The young predator nodded enthusiastically. Ambassador Wren watched his son with an expression David was learning to read as fondness. He wants to ask you something. He is nervous. David gave Stryker his full attention. What is it, buddy? Through a combination of chirps, gestures, and his father's translation, Stryker asked if David would be his official guardian while they remained on the station. Your what? Our species has a tradition, Wren explained. When a young one finds a protector outside their immediate family, that bond can be formalized. It is both honor and responsibility. You would have authority to make decisions for his welfare. In return, you accept the duty of his care. I'm not qualified to raise a Valorian child. You are the only person he trusts. That makes you uniquely qualified. David looked at Stryker's hopeful face. The young predator who had been a terrified, aggressive mess 3 weeks ago now stood calm and happy, waiting for an answer. Okay, David said. Yeah, I'll do it. Stryker's delighted chirp echoed through the play area. Other children looked up from their activities, curious about the celebration. The scientists recorded everything, of course, another data point in their growing research. But David ignored them. He was too busy being tackled by an ecstatic predator cub who just wanted someone to care. That evening, David sat in his quarters writing in a notebook. His attempt at documenting his methods, as Ambassador Wren had suggested. He stared at the mostly blank pages and sighed. How did you write down instinct? How did you explain that children needed patience, attention, and someone willing to meet them where they were? These weren't revolutionary concepts on Earth. They were just parenting basics, but apparently, the galaxy needed to relearn them. David picked up his pen and started with the simplest truth he knew. Children are not problems to be solved with technology. They are young beings learning to exist in a complicated universe. Sometimes they need a box. Sometimes they need a blanket. Sometimes they just need someone to sit with them and hum until the scary feelings pass. Start there, he wrote. Everything else follows. Outside his window, Harmony 7 orbited in silence. Inside, children from across the galaxy slept peacefully, many of them in cardboard boxes. And David Reed, maintenance technician turned accidental childcare revolutionary, hoped he was doing right by all of them. The alert came through at 2 a.m. station time. dragging David from sleep with its insistent beeping. He grabbed his communicator and saw the message that made his stomach drop. Security alert. All personnel shelter in place. Hostile boarding detected. Pirates. Harmony 7 had been targeted before, but never successfully. The station's defensive systems were state-of-the-art. Whoever was attacking now either had serious firepower or serious desperation. David's quarters were in the maintenance sector, relatively safe from the docking bays where boarders would enter. He should follow protocol, lock his door, and wait for security to handle it. That was the smart choice. Then his communicator buzzed again, this time from Ambassador Wren. The message was 2 words: help Stryker. David was dressed and moving before conscious thought caught up with training. His hands shook as he grabbed his toolkit out of habit. Tools wouldn't help against pirates, but the weight was comforting. The corridors were chaos. Alarms blared. Emergency lighting painted everything in harsh red. Station personnel ran past him toward designated safe zones. David fought against the current, heading deeper into the diplomatic quarters. He found Wren in the hallway outside the emergency shelter, all 4 arms gesturing frantically at a sealed door. They locked down automatically, Wren said, his translator struggling with his panic. All the children are inside. But the pirates knew. They are heading this way. How did they know where the kids would be? Someone gave them information. We have a security breach. Through the door, David could hear crying. Not just Stryker. All the children he had been caring for were in that shelter. 17 young ones from different species now trapped with attackers coming for them. Can we open it from out here? David asked. Not without command override codes. Security measure to prevent exactly this situation. Then we need to get inside another way. Wren looked at him with confusion. There is no other way, David thought fast. Maintenance access. Every major room had secondary entrances for repairs. The shelter would be no different. He pulled up station schematics on his communicator, fingers flying across the screen. There. Ventilation shaft. It connects to the shelter's air circulation system. That opening is too small for either of us, but I can get to the access panel, override the lock from inside. They ran. The ventilation shaft entrance was 3 corridors away. Behind them, David heard shouting in languages his translator didn't recognize. The pirates were close. The access panel came off easily. David had opened 1,000 of them. He climbed into the shaft, pulling himself forward on his elbows. The space was tight, dark, and smelled like recycled air. His communicator light guided the way. Inside the shelter, the crying had gotten worse. He could hear different species' distress calls mixing together. Stryker's chirps of fear cut through everything else. David found the access panel to the shelter and worked quickly. His hands knew the wiring by heart. 5 minutes of careful manipulation and the lock disengaged with a click. He dropped down into the shelter and nearly got tackled by a terrified Valorian cub. David! Stryker clung to him with enough force to bruise. I've got you, buddy. I've got you. The shelter was a mess. Children huddled in corners, their guardians trying desperately to keep them calm. The crystalline child's vibrations were shaking the walls. The magma dweller's temperature had spiked so high that nearby surfaces were scorching. The young Willow was cycling through colors so fast it was nauseating to watch, and the pirates were cutting through the main door. David could see the torches glow through the seam. They had maybe 2 minutes? Listen to me, David said, raising his voice. All of you. I need you to trust me right now. The adults looked at him with desperate hope. The children were too scared to pay attention. David grabbed the closest cardboard box from Stryker's collection. He set it down in the center of the room. Stryker, remember when we first met? You were scared and I gave you a safe place. I need you to be brave now and help me. The young Valorian's eyes were wide with fear, but he nodded. Good. I need you to get in your box. Right now. And I need you to be quiet, like we practiced during the hiding game. Stryker scrambled into the box. His chirping stopped. Everyone else, David continued, your children need to hide too. Use anything you can find. Boxes, blankets, whatever makes them feel safe and small. Quick. The adults moved with purpose born of panic. Boxes appeared from storage areas. Blankets were distributed. Within 90 seconds, every child had their own hiding spot. The door was nearly through. David could see figures moving on the other side. Now the hard part, David said. When they come through, we cannot react with aggression. They want to fight. They expect panic and violence. We give them nothing. They are here to kidnap our children, one parent hissed, and they will fail. But only if we stay calm. Children mirror adult emotions. If we panic, they panic. If we stay controlled, they stay hidden. The door burst open. 5 figures in combat armor poured through, weapons raised. They looked around the shelter, expecting chaos. What they found was silence. David stood in the center of the room, hands visible and empty. Around him, adults from various species stood with forced calm. No children were visible. "Where are the younglings?" the lead pirate demanded. Their translator made the words sharp and threatening. "Safe," David said simply. "We have scanners. We know they are here. Then you know they are not going anywhere." The pirate moved closer, weapon pointed at David's chest. "You think you can protect them? We can kill every adult here. You could. But then you would have no leverage and no hostages. Just angry governments and bounty hunters coming for you." Behind the pirate, David saw one of the boxes shift slightly. Stryker was inside, listening to everything. The young Valorian's fear scent would be detectable. But David kept his voice level, his body language relaxed. "You want to know why you will fail?" David continued. "Because these children are not alone. They have protectors. They have safe spaces. They have learned that hiding is not cowardice. It is survival." The crystalline child's box began vibrating. Her parents started to move toward her, but David caught their eye and shook his head slightly. "Trust the process," David began humming. That same simple tune he always used. Nothing threatening. Just sound to fill the silence. The effect was immediate. Inside their hiding places, children recognized the sound. The vibrations from the crystalline's box decreased. The scorch marks from the magma dwellers' area stopped spreading. Even Stryker's fear scent faded. "What are you doing?" the pirate asked, confused. "Making sure the children know they are safe. Even now. Even with you here." The standoff lasted another tense minute. Then station security breached from the corridor, overwhelming the pirates with superior numbers and training. The fight was brief, professional. The attackers never reached a single child. When it was over, David helped each young one emerge from their hiding places. They were shaken but unharmed. Several clung to him, seeking comfort from familiar presence. Stryker emerged last, his small body trembling. "We were brave," he chirped quietly. "You were incredibly brave," David confirmed. "All of you were." Ambassador Wren approached, his scales showing colors David had learned meant profound gratitude. "You saved them. Not just from the pirates, from the trauma of helplessness. I just reminded them they had control. Even in danger, they could make choices. Hide. Stay quiet. Trust their protectors." The station security chief stood nearby, looking shell-shocked. Every threat assessment said the children would panic. Their fear responses would make them impossible to extract safely. They did not panic because someone taught them they did not have to, one of the adult guardians said. The humans showed them how to find calm even in chaos. David felt exhausted. The adrenaline was fading, leaving him shaky. But around him, children were already calming down. Parents comforted offspring. The crystalline child hummed peacefully. The magma dweller's temperature had normalized. They would all have difficult nights ahead. Processing fear took time. But they had faced danger and survived it together. That counted for something. Ambassador Wren placed a hand on David's shoulder. "The galaxy will want to know how you did this, how you kept them all safe." David looked at the cardboard boxes scattered around the shelter, simple containers that had become shields against fear. "I just gave them what every child needs. Someone who stays calm when they cannot. Someone who reminds them they are not alone." Outside the shelter, investigators were already working to find how the pirates had gotten such specific information. Security protocols would be reviewed and strengthened. The diplomatic community would demand answers and justice. But inside this room, 17 children from across the galaxy sat with their protectors, learning that safety was not about the absence of danger. It was about having people who would stand firm even when everything felt terrifying. David settled into a corner with Stryker curled against his side. Other children gravitated toward them, seeking the calm that David somehow projected even when his own hands shook. Maybe that was the real lesson. Not that you had to be fearless, just that you had to be present, had to show up, had to remember that children needed adults who could hold steady when the world turned frightening. David closed his eyes and kept humming, that simple tune becoming a promise that everything would be okay. News of the pirate attack spread through the galaxy faster than light could travel between stars. Within days, Harmony 7 became the most watched station in known space, not because of the attack itself, but because of what happened during it. 17 children from different species, all kept calm by a human maintenance worker in some cardboard boxes. David found himself summoned to the station commander's office. He had never been there before. The room was designed to accommodate multiple species, with adjustable gravity fields and atmosphere controls. Commander Ashwood sat behind a desk that looked like it cost more than David's annual salary. "Sit, please," Ashwood said. Her tone was formal but not unfriendly. David sat. Behind him, the floor-to-ceiling window showed the galaxy spinning slowly. Ships came and went from the docking bays like insects around a hive. "The Galactic Council wants to speak with you," Ashwood began. "Representatives from 43 worlds have requested your presence to explain your methodologies." "I don't have methodologies. I just watch kids. That is what makes this extraordinary. Our analysis of the attack shows that your intervention prevented a catastrophic outcome. Standard protocol would have resulted in multiple casualties and significant trauma." "Standard protocol sounds broken." Ashwood allowed herself a small smile. "Many are beginning to agree with you. The scientific community is in an uproar. Your approaches contradict decades of established practice. Maybe established practice needs updating. Perhaps." She leaned forward. "Which brings me to the offer. The Council wants to create a new position, Galactic Childcare Consultant. You would travel to different worlds, teach your methods, help establish new protocols. The compensation would be substantial." David thought about his apartment back on Earth, his sister's kids, movie nights and backyard barbecues, normal life. "I'm not qualified for something like that. You have successfully managed children from species that specialized xenopsychologists cannot handle. You prevented a diplomatic crisis that could have destabilized 3 sectors. You developed techniques that work across biological barriers that were thought to be insurmountable. I would say you are uniquely qualified. I just pay attention and use common sense. Common sense is apparently uncommon in the galaxy." David looked out the window again, ships preparing to jump to hyperspace, each one carrying people to destinations he could barely imagine. He thought about all those worlds, all those children who might need someone to show them a better way. "Can I think about it?" "Of course. The Council is patient, mostly." Ashwood stood, indicating the meeting was over. "David, whatever you decide, know that you have already changed things. People are questioning assumptions they held for generations. That matters." He left the office and found Ambassador Wren waiting in the corridor. Stryker sat beside his father, playing with a puzzle cube that David had made from spare parts and colored wire. "The commander made her offer," Wren observed. "Word travels fast. Diplomatic channels are efficient when they wish to be." Wren watched his son for a moment before continuing. "I wanted to tell you something before you make your decision. Since you became Stryker's guardian, I have been contacted by 73 Valorian families. All of them have children struggling with trauma. All of them want to know if you could help. 73? Our species prides itself on strength. We do not admit weakness easily. But watching you with Stryker, seeing how simple kindness achieved what our best medical science could not, it gave parents permission to ask for help." Stryker looked up from his puzzle and chirped happily. He showed David the solution he had found, proud of his accomplishment. "Good job, buddy," David said, examining the cube. "You are getting really good at these." "He is thriving," Wren said quietly. 2 months ago, I thought I might lose him to his grief. Now he plays, learns, and trusts again. You did that, he did that. I just gave him space to heal, which is exactly the lesson the galaxy needs to learn." Over the next week, David tried to return to normal work. But normal no longer existed. His maintenance shifts were constantly interrupted by requests. Could he look at this child who would not sleep? Could he advise on that species' developmental issues? Could he review new protocols being proposed by various scientific institutions? The improvised play area had grown into a full facility. Station Command allocated an entire section for it. Other humans from the crew volunteered to help, learning from David's example. Soon there were multiple caregivers implementing his techniques. Patricia found him during one of these sessions, watching as a human technician named Robert successfully calmed a distressed methane breather using patient presence and a modified sensory box. "You started something," Patricia said. "I noticed. How does it feel being revolutionary?" David watched Robert work. The younger man was natural with children, his movements gentle and his tone soothing. He had taken David's basic concepts and adapted them beautifully. Feels like I accidentally tripped over something that should have been obvious all along, David admitted. Kids need patience. They need someone to see them as individuals, not just representatives of their species. They need simple comfort more than complex technology. How did the galaxy forget that? Maybe they did not forget. Maybe they never knew. Humans evolved in small tribes. We raised children communally. We had to learn patience and observation because survival depended on it. Other species had different evolutionary pressures. So we are just better at this? No. But we might see things others miss because we are looking from a different angle. That made David think. Different angles. Different perspectives. Maybe that was humanity's real contribution. Not superior knowledge, but the willingness to question why things were done a certain way. That evening, he sat with Stryker in the young Valorian's favorite box. The cub was getting too big for it now, but he still liked to curl up inside when he wanted quiet time. I might have to go away soon, David said. There are people who want me to teach them what we do here. Stryker's eyes widened with concern. Not forever, David assured him quickly. I would come back, but it would mean traveling, seeing other worlds, helping other children who are scared like you were. The young predator was quiet for a long moment. Then he chirped softly and pulled a drawing from his box. He had been working on it for days. It showed David surrounded by children of all different shapes and sizes. At the center of the drawing, Stryker had written words in both Valorian and English. Helper of all cubs, is that how you see me? David asked. Stryker nodded seriously. Then he pointed at the drawing and then at the door, making it clear what he meant. The other cubs outside this room needed David too. You are a very wise young one, David said. The decision became clear. He could stay safe in his normal job, or he could step into uncertainty and maybe help change things for countless children across the galaxy. When he looked at it that way, there was really only one choice. David accepted the council's offer the next morning. The news went out through official channels and the response was immediate. Requests for visits poured in from dozens of worlds. Educational institutions wanted him as a speaker. Medical facilities wanted him as a consultant. Governments wanted his methods documented and distributed. It was overwhelming, but Ambassador Wren helped him organize it. They would start with a tour of 5 worlds, each with different childcare challenges. David would observe, teach, and learn. After that, they would establish training centers where others could learn and spread the knowledge further. On his last night before the journey began, David gathered all the children in his care for one final session. They sat in a circle, their various forms creating a strange but beautiful diversity. I want you all to remember something, David said. You are not your species' representatives. You are not problems to be solved. You are young ones learning to be yourselves. That is enough. You're enough, the crystalline child chimed softly. The magma dweller glowed with warm light. The young willow turned a gentle blue that meant contentment. Stryker chirped and leaned against David's side. When you feel scared or overwhelmed, remember you have tools now. Safe spaces, comfort items. People who understand. And most importantly, you know that it is okay to need these things. Needing help is not weakness. It is wisdom. Robert and the other human volunteers watched from the edges of the room. They would continue the work here while David traveled. The foundation was laid. The methods were spreading. As the session ended and children returned to their parents, David felt the weight of what he was about to undertake. Teaching the galaxy new ways of seeing children. Challenging centuries of established practice. It should have terrified him. Instead, he thought about Stryker's drawing. Helper of all cubs. Maybe that was exactly who he needed to be. The journey would begin tomorrow. New worlds awaited. Children who needed someone to show them they mattered, that their feelings were valid, that simple kindness could be more powerful than any technology. David packed his bag that night. Tools because he was still a maintenance worker at heart. Notebooks to record what he learned. And one cardboard box folded flat as a reminder of where it all started. Sometimes the simplest things changed everything. 6 months after leaving Harmony 7, David stood in a training center on the crystalline homeworld and watched as 24 child care professionals struggled with a basic concept. He had explained it 3 different ways. They still looked confused. Let me show you again. David said patiently. He sat down on the floor, making himself smaller and less threatening. The young crystalline in front of him was resonating with anxiety, their structure vibrating at frequencies that made nearby objects hum. David did not reach for technology. He did not consult a database. He simply placed a dampening cloth gently over the child's upper structure and began humming. Within minutes, the vibrations calmed. The child settled into a peaceful state. The professionals made notes on their data pads, trying to quantify something that could not be easily measured. How did you document presence? How did you create a formula for paying attention? You see the pattern, David explained. The child tells you what they need through behavior. You respond with the simplest intervention that might help. No overthinking, just observation and action. But without protocols, how do we ensure consistency? One trainee asked. You don't. Every child is different. The protocol is to stay flexible. This answer never satisfied them at first. Beings who had built civilizations on precise calculations and reproducible results struggled with approaches that required instinct and adaptation. But eventually they got it. David had seen it happen on 4 worlds already. His communicator buzzed. A message from Ambassador Wren back on Harmony 7. The negotiations had concluded successfully, and a new wing of the station was being dedicated to cross-species childcare research. They wanted to name it after David. He declined politely, as he had declined the last 5 naming proposals. This work was not about recognition. It was about helping children. The tour had been exhausting but productive. Each world presented new challenges. On the Whispering Willow homeworld, he had worked with plant-based younglings who struggled with seasonal depression. Simple full-spectrum lighting and consistent care routines made all the difference. On the Magma Dwellers volcanic planet, he had helped establish cooling centers where overheated children could regulate their temperatures through meditation techniques adapted from human practices. The centers used no expensive technology, just quiet spaces and trained caregivers. The Melodian homeworld had been particularly resistant at first. Their society prided itself on using harmonic frequencies for all childcare needs. The idea that simple physical comfort could be more effective was almost offensive to them. But when David successfully calmed a child that their best harmonics experts could not help, attitudes shifted. That was the pattern everywhere. Skepticism, then demonstration, then reluctant acceptance, finally enthusiasm. David was getting tired of proving the same points repeatedly, but he understood. Change was hard, especially when it challenged fundamental assumptions. Stryker had traveled with him for the first 3 worlds before returning to Harmony 7 to attend school. The young Valorian was doing well, thriving in ways his father had never imagined possible. He sent David drawings every week, each one showing his growing confidence and happiness. Other success stories accumulated. The crystalline child who had been in the shelter during the pirate attack now helped teach other young crystallines how to manage their vibrations. The magma dweller who had struggled with temperature control now ran youth meditation groups. The young willow who used to cycle through emotions uncontrollably now had steady emotional regulation. Children helping children. That had become an unexpected benefit of David's methods. When young ones learned to manage their own struggles, they naturally wanted to help others. It created cycles of support that self-perpetuated. The training session ended and David packed his materials. His supervisor for this leg of the tour, a crystalline named Harmony, approached with their characteristic chiming gait. The council has requested your presence for a formal ceremony, Harmony said. They wish to present you with the Medal of Galactic Service. I already told them I don't want medals. They are quite insistent. Apparently your methods have been adopted by over 200 worlds now. Childhood trauma rates have decreased by measurable percentages in every location that implements your protocols. They are not my protocols. They are just good childcare. Nevertheless, you brought them to the galaxy. That deserves recognition, David sighed. He had learned that sometimes accepting honors was easier than fighting about them. Fine, but I am not giving a speech. They assumed you would say that. The speech will be given by Ambassador Wren on your behalf. That made David smile. Wren had become a good friend over these months. The Valorian understood David's discomfort with attention and ran interference whenever possible. The ceremony was scheduled for the following week back on Harmony 7. David used the travel time to review his notes and prepare training materials for the next phase of the program. The council wanted to establish formal certification for childcare workers across member worlds. David was supposed to help design the curriculum. The challenge was creating standards without losing the flexibility that made the approach work. Too rigid and it became just another protocol. Too loose and quality would vary wildly. Finding the balance required careful thought. He worked on the problem during the 3-day journey back to the station. By the time they arrived, he had a draft outline that emphasized core principles over specific techniques: observation, patience, simplicity, and adaptation. Everything else would flow from those foundations. Harmony 7 looked different when his ship docked. New sections had been added during his absence. The child care wing was now the largest civilian facility on the station. Through the windows, David could see children of various species playing in areas designed using his concepts. Cardboard boxes were everywhere, each one a small fortress of safety. Robert met him at the airlock, grinning widely. "Welcome back. You are going to love what we built while you were gone." The tour of the new facilities took 2 hours. Everything had been expanded and improved, but the core principles remained. Simple materials, flexible spaces, emphasis on comfort and security over technology and sterile efficiency. "We have a waiting list now," Robert explained. "Families requesting temporary relocation to Harmony 7, just so their children can attend our programs. The council is discussing establishing similar centers on every major station." "That is a lot of cardboard boxes." Robert laughed. "The shipping companies love us." Who knew cardboard would become a strategic resource? That evening, David had dinner with Ambassador Wren and Stryker. The young Valorian had grown noticeably in 6 months. His scales were brighter, his movements more confident. He chattered excitedly about school, friends, and a dozen other things that normal, healthy children cared about. "You did well with him," David said to Wren. "We did well," Wren corrected. "You gave us the foundation. I simply continued what you started." "How are the other families?" "The ones who contacted you about their children. 61 of the 73 have reported significant improvements. The others are making progress. Your training programs are spreading through our medical community. We are rewriting textbooks." David felt satisfaction at that. Real, lasting change. Not just helping individual children, but shifting entire systems. The medal ceremony was mercifully brief. David stood on a stage while the council representative gave a speech about innovation, compassion, and the power of simple solutions. They presented him with an ornate medal that probably cost enough to fund a small childcare center. He accepted it graciously and said only, "Thank you. But remember, this is not about me. It is about every child who needs someone to see them as they are, not as problems to solve. Keep that focus and we will all do fine." The audience appreciated the brevity. Diplomats were used to long, flowery speeches. David's directness was refreshing. After the ceremony, he met with the council's education committee to discuss the certification program. They spent 4 hours debating details, philosophies, and implementation strategies. David insisted on keeping the training accessible. No expensive requirements, no complicated prerequisites. Just people who genuinely cared about children and were willing to learn. By the end of the meeting, they had a framework. Training centers on major worlds, mentorship programs where experienced practitioners taught newcomers, evaluation based on outcomes rather than adherence to rigid methods. It was not perfect, but it was a start. That night, David returned to his quarters and found them filled with gifts from across the galaxy. Toys, art supplies, letters from children he had helped. One package contained a blanket made by a whispering willow community, woven with fibers that changed colors based on the holder's emotions. He sat on his bed surrounded by evidence that his work mattered. 6 months ago, he had been a maintenance technician who sometimes watched his sister's kids. Now he was changing how an entire galaxy thought about childcare. It should have felt overwhelming. Instead, it felt right. His communicator showed a message from Patricia. Station Command wanted to know if he would accept a permanent position as Director of Childcare Services. He could shape the program, train others, and continue spreading the work. David thought about it. No more fixing air conditioning. No more replacing light panels, just this. Helping children across the galaxy feel safe, seen, and valued. He typed his response, "Yes, but I am keeping my tool belt. Never know when you will need to fix something." Patricia's reply came instantly. "Wouldn't expect anything else." David stood and walked to his window. Outside, the galaxy turned in its slow dance. Countless worlds, countless children. Countless opportunities to make things just a little bit better. He picked up the folded cardboard box from his desk. The same one he had brought from Earth. It was worn now. Edges soft from handling. But it still worked. Still served its purpose. Sometimes the simplest things were the most powerful. That was the lesson he had learned and now taught to others. Technology was wonderful. Science was valuable. But neither could replace basic kindness, patient observation, and the willingness to meet children where they were. David set the box down and smiled. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. More children to help. More professionals to train. More systems to change. But tonight he would rest. Because even helpers needed their own safe spaces sometimes. Outside his window, a ship prepared for departure. Its destination was unknown to David, but he knew one thing for certain. Wherever it was going, children would be there. And maybe, just maybe, someone on that world now knew that a cardboard box could be more valuable than the most advanced technology. The galaxy was learning. Slowly but surely it was learning. And David Reed, former maintenance technician turned accidental revolutionary, was content with that.